Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draft Thoughts. This is the wrap up edition. This is my co host, Charles McDonald, and I am Ben Natan. How are you doing, Charles?
I'm doing pretty good. Long day, ready to start the summer, man.
I feel you. I'm in the middle of finals week. I have a German final on Friday, and I hate myself. I'm just kind of like sitting in my room, like patiently awaiting my final. It's not going to be pretty, but we're out here trying to survive. All
Just
right,
grinding,
so
man.
yeah, seriously. So we're a little late on this. I mean, the draft ended 2 weeks ago, and it's kind of crazy that it's been that long, but we have shit to do. But the draft happened 2 weeks ago, and honestly, it I mean, people were expecting kind of crazy stuff to happen, and it didn't happen, and I'm a little upset about it. I won't get too much into that. Um, but it just got a lot of it played out like we thought it would, and Um, the back 15 of the first round was a little bit interesting with some, guys going that maybe weren't totally expecting to go. Um, but let's kind of get into this. Who do you? I mean, when you look at this draft, there's not a ton of teams that really stand out to you as really having a horrible draft. And a lot of teams that actually came away, I think, with a ton of decent players. But who do you think actually ended up having, some of the best drafts?
Um, Probably, I think Minnesota definitely probably. Minnesota had a really good draft. They landed Trey Waynes in the first round. I mean, he wasn't my top corner, but still like a very valuable asset. There's some people have like questions about his ability to change directions, but there's no doubt in my mind that he's a talented player who will upgrade Uh, Minnesota's defense and served very well as the number two corner across from Xavier Rhodes. He's already approaching elite status. And they picked up Eric Kendricks in the second round, which was a steal. Daniil Hunter in the third, who's got potential out through the roof and is a force player. TJ Clemmings in the fourth, which is also another steal. So when you look at that, that's four players in the first round that could end up being like high impact players for them in the very near future. Zimmer killed it this draft, and I think Spielman. For some reason, I feel like Spielman gets a little like undersold in the media and Twitter, but he's a really good GM, and he killed it again in this draft, just like he did last year.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think another pick that went under the radar. I mean, and it's easy for their other picks to go under the radar, considering how well they did in the first 4 rounds. But getting Stephon Diggs late in the draft, um, I think Diggs was a guy who got really underrated during the draft process. I think people kind of overrated his faults and weren't really focusing on where he was winning as a receiver. And we're talking about a very smooth route runner, very quick, good after the catch. Has some issues with his hands, like not the best, not the best at the catch point, but someone who's going to be able to keep himself clean through his routes and get open over the middle of the field. And I think that's going to be a big asset for Teddy Bridgewater because that offense, I mean, doesn't really have a guy like that. I mean, Mike Wallace is probably going to be their deep guy, and Kyle Rudolph is going to be like their red zone target. But having that quick underneath type of receiver, I think Diggs is going to be able to blossom into that role. And I think that's a really good value late in the draft. But I absolutely agree with you that the Vikings had a good draft. Do you have any other drafts that really stood out to you as really being good?
Falcons, baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got Vic Beasley, who was my number one player, and our pass rush has been absolutely pitiful the past like since Abraham left after the NFC Championship game. It's really been lacking. Got Vic Beasley in the first round, Jalen Collins in the second round, who's like the identical mold of what Dan Quinn and that Seattle scheme looks for in their cornerbacks. Third round, Tevin Coleman, which I'm still a little iffy on him, but when Julio Jones goes down, like our offense literally has no way to uh, like generate big plays, and Tevin Coleman can be a source for that. Fourth round game, Justin Hardy. I know you were really high on him. He could come in. He'll be a starting slot receiver, maybe even take over Roddy in the future. And then in the fifth round, trading up to get Grady Jarrett. I mean, that's a guy who can be an impactful role player from day one. And as a fifth round pick, that's incredible value. So I was really happy with what the Falcons did on draft weekend.
Yeah, and I mean the Falcons essentially, I mean they got two players I had first round grades on with Justin Hardy and Vic Beasley. And like you said, Hardy's immediately going to step into that slot receiver role. And I know there were some concerns about his ability to separate, and he's not that athletic. But I mean, he's kind of similar to Jarvis Landry in that regard, where he's like not totally athletic, but he's going to kick your ass at the catch point, and he's going to catch the ball if you throw it at him. And he's also a lot more polished as a route runner than Jarvis Landry, and I think he's actually pretty quick. So I think he's going to really thrive in that slot receiver role. And Roddy White is the perfect player for him to learn from because they're similar body types and kind of similar playing styles. And the Grady Jarrett pick is tremendous. I mean, I wasn't as high on Grady Jarrett as the rest of the draft community was. I mean, a lot of guys had him like fringe first rounder as like a top 40 type of player. I wasn't that high on him. I did really like him, and I think getting him in the 5th round, I mean, he's going to impact the defensive line potentially day one as a penetrating 3 technique. So I mean, this is, you look at this draft and based on a lot of people's evaluations, this is the kind of draft where you could look back on in a few years and say this was a transformative draft in the franchise because you got so many impacting players.
Yep, I completely agree with you. I was pumped, elated. Like you can even go back and look at my tweets from the first round of the draft.
Yeah, no, I remember.
Yeah, that was bad.
But do you think any other teams really came away from the draft like as winners?
Jacksonville too. Like it's unfortunate what happened with Fowler and his injury, but they couldn't predict that when they drafted him. So they got Fowler in the first round, TJ Yeldon in the second round. I mean, that's a guy who I felt like was being a little undersold throughout the draft process because Jacksonville, like, they've seen what New England has done in the playoffs the past 2 years to beat Indianapolis. And I truly believe that teams like they do draft to beat the other teams in their division. We've seen the Patriots be physical up front, run the ball, and that's how you beat Indianapolis. So, Jacksonville, they're getting more physical up front with Yeldon, AJ Cann. They had Fowler, who's a really physical player. Sample, he's a big hitter. But I think their best pick was in the 6th round when they picked up Michael Bennett, who for some reason just fell all the way down to the end of the draft. That's a guy who could come in and, I mean, there are people who thought he was better than Grady Jarrett. Some people have first-round grades on him. So to get him in the 6th round, that's incredible value. And that's a guy who could be like a mainstay on their defense for years to come.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I thought that was just an absolute steal for Jacksonville. And especially when you have Sindaric Marks, who went down with an ACL injury late in the year, they're going to really need a presence at that 3 technique going into the season. And I think that Bennett, at least in a rotational role, is going to be able to provide some pass rush from that position. I think just my takes on some of these best drafts. I think that the Chiefs actually, despite the Mitch Morse pick, which I thought was ridiculous because I mean I guess I've never heard of Mitch Morse before and they introduced him as a backup center, which was really weird. But I'm trying to talk about the good stuff that they did. I think that Marcus Peters is a great fit in Kansas City. And the thing with Marcus Peters is like there's this whole question surrounding his character, and there's a lot of conflicting reports about whether it was really him or it was the coaching staff or something like that. But one thing I do know, and being an Eagles fan, is Andy Reid has always kind of taken upon himself like guys with more character issues, or just, I mean, not even like criminal history, but like just like kind of like interesting characters. And he's always done a really good job with them. And I think that Peters, if there is kind of a character issue there, I think that he landed in a good situation for him in a comfortable environment. And also, football-wise, the scheme is really good for him. That scheme really asks for big physical corners on the outside who are going to be able to challenge the receivers at the line of scrimmage, and that's exactly what Peters does, and I think it's really going to maximize his strengths. And speaking of cornerbacks like that, they also got Steven Nelson later in the draft, who is a similar style of cornerback where he's very, very physical with receivers. He's a good man cover corner, not the best tackler, but very physical, very I mean, all the stuff coming out about him is like he's very confident and like he likes to try to get in receivers' heads. And I think in a couple of years you're going to see a Chiefs secondary where you're going to have Phillip Gaines, Marcus Peters on the outside, and then Steven Nelson working in that slot. So you have three physical cover corners, and I think that was really like a solid job for them to come away from the draft with two really good corners, and also get Chris Conley, who I think can be very, very good. He's obviously very, very athletic. Didn't really get a chance to thrive in the Georgia offense because one, it's a run heavy offense, and two, he was playing with Hudson Mason this year, so he didn't really get a chance to produce at an optimal level. But he's still, in the small sample sizes he was given, he was able to perform at a rate that makes me very excited about him as a player. And I think that he could become a player in Kansas City, be it with Alex Smith or whoever plays quarterback for them in a couple of years. So I like their draft. Even if it's just for those three players, I think they did a really good job. And I think the Lions actually had a pretty decent draft too. A lot of people were kind of underrating Laken Tomlinson, or at least I was maybe overrating him. I don't know. I really liked Laken Tomlinson during the process. I thought he was a very physical, very powerful offensive lineman, and he kind of fits in with what they're trying to do up front. And having an interior line with him and Walford in it is going to be pretty formidable. And then getting Amir Abdullah, they just cut Reggie Bush, and getting Amir Abdullah to replace Reggie Bush is, that's similar players dynamically, but I think Amir Abdullah is going to be a lot better for them. And he is electric, and he's going to provide a lot in the passing game. And that's a team that likes to throw the ball a lot. And if they get him involved as a receiver, I think that, you're really maximizing what he can do in terms of him working in space. So I really, really liked, I just thought that was an awesome pick. And then getting Alex Carter, physical long corner, which is what they're trying to do on the outside of their defense in the third round. So just a really good fit. And then in the later rounds, getting Gabe Wright, because obviously they lost Ndamukong Suh and they lost Nick Fairley this offseason. So it was kind of important for them to add depth to their interior defensive line. Gabe Wright is similar to, Michael Bennett and Grady Jarrett in terms of you're getting that penetrating three technique tackle. And I think they got him in the fifth round. So I think that was really, really good value for that. And I just think they had a really good draft. Now, on the flip side of that, what teams do you think had really tanked the draft?
Dude, I think the Rams are just a terrible draft.
Yeah.
I like Todd Gurley. He was one of my top 5 players in this draft. So I'm cool with that pick at 10. So then we get to 57. Rob Havenstein, offensive tackle, Wisconsin. All right, he has fans throughout the draft cycle, but I don't know how many people had him rated as a second-round pick. I think they probably could have gotten him in the 4th or 5th round, maybe even 6th round. Second round, that's a bit of a reach, but maybe he can develop into a starter. Then we get to 72. Another offensive tackle, Jamon Brown. Offensive tackle, Louisville. I barely had him as a draftable player. I didn't like Eli Harold at all, and Eli Harold held his own against Jamon Brown in their game versus Louisville. That was a dumb pick. And now we get to the pinnacle of just awfulness in their draft class, picking Sean Mannion in the 3rd round. What are you thinking? He's arguably one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen start an extended period amount of time at a Division I program. He's a poor man's version of Nick Foles, who they have on their roster. I don't understand what NFL teams were seeing when they watched Sean Mannion. He's just a big, tall guy who's got a decent arm, but he literally offers nothing else besides that. And then they get to the 4th round, Andrew Donnell, another offensive tackle out of Iowa. I never even heard of him, to be honest, so I have nothing to say about that. And then late round picks are late round picks. So I think the Rams really, really botched this draft. I've really got nothing to say.
Yeah, and it was clear that they had they're like, this is the kind of team we want to build. We want like physical guys up front. We want to really run the ball. But I mean, they completely fucked up the execution in terms of like how to actually get those type of players. Because look, I think Todd Gurley's awesome. I had him as like a top, I don't even know, but I had him really high. And I think, I mean, in a vacuum, he's a really, really good player. But you have arguably the most expendable position in football, the deepest position in the draft, and a player with an ACL tear. I mean, there's no part of the equation that says this is a player that should go in the top 10 of the draft, and yet they spent a top 10 pick on him. It's just difficult for me to rationalize that. And I think that honestly, if they're really trying to do that, like, we're going to build this team and we're going to run the ball a shit ton. You spend that top 10 pick on a lineman, you get the offensive lineman and then you get, Duke Johnson, or you get a Amir Abdullah or David Cobb, or, any of those running backs in the later rounds, and like really good ones fell. But I just think they went about the whole thing wrong. Taking Todd Gurley, taking a huge injury risk at 10, and then taking a bunch of shitty offensive linemen, or at least lesser offensive linemen, and then taking Sean Mannion. I mean,
like, what are you doing, man?
Jeff Fisher is really striving for that 7-9. He's really pushing for that 7-9 season. So yeah, that was an awful draft. But do any of the other drafts really stand out to you as being bad?
That one was by far the worst for me. To me, I thought the Raiders were I thought they were a little puzzling, to be honest. Like, I get picking Amari Cooper at 4. It makes sense, but I think I would have gone with Leonard Williams in that case, just because there were so many receivers this year. But, I get that pick. Going Mario Edwards at 35 when guys like Preston Smith was on the board, and I feel like he would have fit what they're trying to do on defense a lot better. And now you hear about them playing Edwards at Leo, which is not a good fit for his skill set, even with the lost weight. That pick was a little puzzling. I don't mind Walford at 68 because, Carr could use a young, not talented security blanket. That's fine. Getting John Feliciano in the 4th round makes no sense. I went back and watched him because I hadn't heard of him, and he's just like a below average guard. And if you're expecting him to start on that offensive line, that's going to be disastrous for them. Ben Heaney was all right, but then they doubled up on linebacker like a few picks later. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this class unfolds, because the only really solid players they got, in my opinion, were Walford and Cooper. I think Edwards is in the wrong scheme for his talents. Ben Heaney, he's solid, but he's got to get a lot stronger to be able to handle the NFL game. And the rest of them were just kind of guys. I don't know. It wasn't that impressive to me, but it wasn't as bad as St. Louis.
Yeah, I think that the Raiders had some questionable picks, but I think that Walford and Amari Cooper are day one going to be impact players on offense. And that's more than you could say for basically any of the picks that St. Louis made. I think a draft that also kind of stood out as being bad was the Packers draft.
Oh,
and
yeah.
We got a question about it from Ian Kenyon about Quentin Rollins, and his ability to be a boundary corner, and I think he can be. I think that he really showed a lot in his first year of playing college football, in terms of his coverage ability and his athletic ability and his ability to play the ball in the air. And I think the value they got on Rollins was very good, and I think that was easily their best pick. But when you look at the rest of their draft, they just took a bunch of special teams players.
Yep.
I mean, they took. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Demarius Randall is a gunner, and that's it. I mean, he sucks. I mean,
Yeah, he's terrible,
I
man.
okay. I know a lot of people really like him, but I don't think he's very good. So
Neither do I.
for now, he's a gunner. And they took a long snapper or someone who at least was announced as a long snapper. They took Ty Montgomery, who is a punt returner. It was just a brutal draft.
Yeah,
But it's not going to matter because they're going to win, 13 games next year, and Ty Montgomery is going to turn into a star because, of course, he will, because the Packers are loved by someone. I don't know. It was a bad draft. I don't know how people can defend it, but
yeah. Like, I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't understand how do you pick Haha last year in the first round? You already have Micah Hyde's a solid player. Then you go out and draft Demarius Randall in the first round. That doesn't make any sense. Then you get Quentin Rollins in the second round, who's better than Randall, but he's also like a corner safety hybrid guy. That doesn't really make sense. Ty Montgomery, he's a kick returner. Like, I'm not even really messing around with him on offense that much. Jake Ryan, he's a punt guy. Brett Hundley, he's not starting for you anytime in the near future. I mean, maybe flip him for a second round pick in a year or two, but that's kind of a wasted pick.
to Philadelphia.
That's what you wanted.
No, that's what's going to happen. They're going to trade him to Philadelphia for a second round pick. Okay, keep on going.
Yeah, like I don't really see any of these guys like making a big impact in their first and second seasons. But it doesn't matter when you have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback.
What happened was there was a fake field goal touchdown in the NFC Championship game, and then the onside kick got fucked up, and then Mike McCarthy said, "Never again. I'm drafting all special teams players," and that's what happened. And now that'll never happen to them again. I think also the Broncos had a bad draft, didn't they?
Yeah, let's touch on that one.
Because they spent their first round pick on Shane Ray, and I think that it's pretty well known that I think that Shane Ray is probably going to be productive, and that defensive line is talented enough where he will probably get like a lot of cleanup sacks. But it's like, why would you spend a first round pick on Shane? I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And it was, I think it's also really strange because Wade Phillips is running that defense. They're going to ask Shane Ray to work in space too as an outside linebacker, and that's, I mean, that's just, I didn't like it. I didn't think it was.
Yeah.
That was a bad pick. But what do you think?
Well, the Shane Ray pick is like really, really confusing to me because I get wanting to build your team around pass rushers. Like, that makes sense. But you look at the two pass rushers the Broncos have, they're really good. DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller, who are arguably like two of the most athletic pass rushers like to play in the NFL. So you've seen on your team how having two athletic guys helps you get to the quarterback. And then you can look in your own division. You see guys like Dee Ford on Kansas City. What was the guy a few years ago for San Diego? Larry English for San Diego. You see that athletic guys, they can't rush the passer effectively in the NFL. And then you go out and get a guy like Shane Ray, who had maybe one of the worst three-cone times probably in like the history of, or not in the history of, but like if we're talking about pass rushers, a guy who's only like 245 pounds, running a 7.7 is like borderline unacceptable. If we're talking about future NFL impact. So it was puzzling for me to see the archetypes that work on their team that have been really successful. You have DeMarcus Ware as a future Hall of Famer. Von Miller is well on their way there. And they're freak athletes. And you go out and pick Shane Ray, who was nothing close to that. That was really puzzling. I wasn't a fan of Tyson Braylo, but I get it. Like, there are people who liked him, but after I saw him get absolutely annihilated by Nate Orchard, I was completely off that bandwagon.
Yeah,
But one pick I did like for them in the sixth round was Darius Kilgo. Uh, I've only watched like 2 or 3 games from him, but he's a pretty disruptive guy and like a solid mover for a big body, so that's fine.
yeah. I think that I'm actually a Ty Sambrilo fan. Well documented, and I think they need offensive line help, and his versatility and his ability. I think he'll be able to come in, compete at either guard or tackle. But I mean, Max Garcia in the fourth round, that's underwhelming. Trevor Simeon, that's horrible, man. I mean, nobody. I mean, you don't watch that guy and be like, all right, he's like an NFL body. I mean, maybe he's. I I don't get it. I don't get that. But they just had a very questionable draft overall. And then I think the Bills too also had kind of a rough draft. They had, I mean, I actually really liked the Ronald Darby pick. Um, and I think that, and I'll touch on this a little bit later, but I think he fits in really well there. But I mean, John Miller, Carlos Williams, Nick O'Leary, ugh, I they could have done better. And it's kind of like classic. It seemed like a very classic like Rex Ryan draft where it's like we want like big physical guys. We don't actually care if they're like athletic or good, but like we want big guys. Um, so I wasn't really impressed about that. And something I want to touch on, and it's not. I mean, it's kind of in the draft overall is neither here nor there, but it's very interesting to look at this team and what they came away from the draft with is the Cowboys.
Yep.
Because the first round pick, they get Byron Jones, who is like just like the most athletic thing on the planet, basically. And not only that is he's also just like this incredibly high character. Um, I mean, like just like a saint, basically. And then in the second round, they stopped Randy Gregory's fall and took Randy Gregory, and there's been a lot of noise being made about this in terms of where does he fit in the locker room, and there's concerns about Randy Gregory in terms of possibly he has anxiety issues and how that relates to his smoking and stuff like that, and really about the locker room fostering a good environment for him to succeed in. And you look at things on the surface level, and you're like, oh, well, that locker room has Greg Hardy in it, and that locker room has Des Bryant in it, and they're relatively temperamental guy. I mean, actually, not relatively temperamental. They're temperamental guys. Obviously, Greg Hardy a lot more than Des Bryant, but it's just going to be interesting to see Randy Gregory in the locker room with those characters. But the flip side of that, I think that everything that's kind of come out of Dallas about Jason Garrett and Jason Garrett's ability to kind of foster a positive environment in the locker room, everything's been very solid about that. And like especially with the Des Bryant situation, how they were really able to kind of build around Des Bryant and kind of keep him in a comfortable situation. And I realized that like Des Bryant and Randy Gregory, like their dispositions are very different, but I think it's encouraging that Des Bryant was able to kind of like find a safe haven like within the Cowboys organization. And I really hope that Gregory kind of finds the same thing, because I'm really rooting for him. I'm never going to root against a guy, and a guy who potentially has a serious issue. But at the same time, like, so that's like the off the field issue or the off the field stuff with Gregory. But on the field, I mean, you have a tremendous pass rushing talent. And you also have Rod Marinelli, so that's like a match made in heaven. And just the Cowboys being able to get that in the middle of the second round is going to be really big for them. What do you think about that?
Yeah, they essentially came away from this draft with 3 first-round talents. And really getting Gregory in the second round, that's a tremendous pickup, especially with Rod Marinelli in place. Byron Jones, I wasn't completely sold on him, but he's better than anything that they have at corner, to be honest, and he's a great locker room guy. And then getting La'el Collins in free agency, like
Right.
that's unbelievable. When you add him to that offensive line, I think the deal was like 3 years, $1.65 million. Like that's chump change. And that's you're talking about your future like right tackle. So now for the future, we're looking at Dallas's offensive line with Tyron Smith at left tackle, left guard. I don't know, but you got Travis Frederick at center, Zach Martin at guard, and then Lyle Collins at right tackle. Like those are four potentially elite players that are still young and still in the rookie contracts. Like that's an incredible get for Dallas after the draft. They killed it. They absolutely killed it.
Yeah, and something that's kind of interesting about Dallas's draft, and it has to relate to their offensive line, is the fact that they didn't draft a running back. And obviously, DeMarco Murray led the NFL in rushing yards last year behind this tremendously talented offensive line. And he left in free agency, went to Philadelphia, and they didn't address the position at all during the draft. And what that speaks to is, I guess, a certain, I mean, almost hubris, where they're saying, our offensive line is so good, where Joseph Randall, Ryan Williams, and what's his name? Darren McFadden, sorry, where Darren McFadden, these three running backs are going to be able to produce behind this line. And all of these guys, I mean, that's a huge drop off from what they had with DeMarco Murray. So that really, I mean, they're trying to really make a statement with their offensive line, and I think that's crazy. I mean, with this draft class being so deep with running backs, and even in undrafted free agency, and they just do not address the position, it's that's really wild to me, because if you put like a moderately like physically gifted, I mean, if you got a guy like, I mean, obviously Tevin Coleman went really high, but Duke Johnson was there in the third round, like, and they just did not pull the trigger on any of these running backs, which is really crazy to me. But if they think they can do it, I mean, more power to them. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But I thought their draft haul was very interesting because, like you said, they got three very talented players, and then outside of that, they didn't really make any impact picks from what I would think would be an impact pick. And then they just didn't draft a running back, which I thought was wild. So moving on a little bit, I mean, who would you say got drafted way too high? So like an overdraft. I mean, obviously it's hard to call these things right now, but relative to your evaluation, who do you think were some players who definitely got overdrafted?
Let's see, overdrafted. I think crap. Mario Edwards, yeah. Mario Edwards at 35. I thought that was a pretty big reach. I had a third round grade on him, and to take him at the the beginning of the first round, and oh my god, beginning of the second round, that's like fringe first round status. Let me pull up my board real quick. Marcus, two edge players, Marcus Golden, second round to Arizona, and Hauli Kikaha, second round to New Orleans. These are guys like their prototype is not set up for them to be successful in the NFL. Like unathletic, they both ran 4.9s, had really poor jumps and 3-cone times. So these are guys that aren't set up to be successful in the NFL, and to take them in the second round when you have much better options, that was really, really puzzling to me. When we look back at the Cardinals draft in 2-3 years, their 5th round pick, Shaq Riddick, will most likely be better than Marcus Golden. Could they ever even dream of being? Both of those picks were really, really puzzling to me. What about you?
I would probably have to go with the Philip Dorsett pick was really strange to me, because any way you swing that, I think that's really a bad pick, because someone tried to explain that to me and oh, well, he's going to be leverage against T.Y. Hilton. It's all right, so you're leveraging, you drafted leverage with the first round pick against one of the better receivers in the league, which is just kind of I get it, but it's still kind of stupid. Or, oh, well, in a few years, this is going to be setting up the the receiving core for the future when Andre Johnson is gone. It's like, all right, so you spent a first round pick on a guy who's going to be like the third or fourth target in your offense because you already have T.Y. Hilton and then you have Dante Moncrief and Dwayne Allen. So it's really, I think that was a really puzzling pick for a team that probably could have gotten an upgrade on their defensive line or maybe even in their secondary. But I didn't like that pick. Also, the Donovan Smith pick was really bad.
Oh my goodness.
You know, at the top of the second round, getting a super raw offensive tackle for a team that needs an offensive tackle right now. I mean, their offensive line is horrible, and they just drafted Jameis Winston with the first pick in the draft. So you're hoping to build around him, and they just took a very, very mentally raw offensive tackle. So that's a dangerous pick going forward. But on the flip side of that, what players do you think? I mean, we already kind of touched on Michael Bennett and Grady Jarrett, but are there any players that really stood out to you as being like really good value?
Yeah, the Ravens, as usual, got good value in this draft. The two players, Max Williams, tight end, Minnesota. I had him graded as a borderline first round pick. He had an early second round status for me. So getting him at the end of the second round, that's tremendous value. But an even better pick for them to me was getting Carl Davis in the third round. Carl Davis finished out as my second ranked interior defensive lineman. And I really thought the only problem with him was, like he's got the athleticism for a 320-pounder that you look for. He's kind of like three technique in a nose tackle's body, which is, that's great. That's great ability. And getting him in the third round is, especially putting him into that Ravens locker room, that's a really good fit for him. And I think he's going to absolutely thrive there. Like that was besides the Grady Jarrett pick and the Michael Bennett pick, that was definitely my favorite pick of the draft. And I'm not surprised that Ozzie Newsome was able to pull off something like that again, as he just feasts on these dumb teams every year.
Yeah, and they have a very good defensive staff too, so hopefully going to be able to maximize Carl Davis's physical gifts. I think that Tennessee getting Trey McBride in the 7th round, that's a tremendous value, and I really like Trey McBride, and he was kind of a do-it-all wide receiver. And I actually had Trey McBride ranked over Dorial Green-Beckham. And they got him 6 rounds later. So I think that I heard something about there was being like a character concern with Trey McBride, or like teams thought like didn't really like his personality or something weird like that. But I think McBride is probably going to be able to make an impact kind of early, at least on special teams. So I think that was a really good pick for them. And then this is kind of an obvious. I mean, these are two obvious ones, but Jay Ajayi fell in the draft because of a degenerative knee disorder. I think that was the issue. But there's no like current issue with his knee. It's just something that's gonna, unfortunately deteriorate down the line. But this is really horrible to phrase it this way, but like the ability to get Jay Ajayi for the next 2 or 3 years on a rookie contract is going to be huge for the Dolphins. And he's going to provide a lot for them, both in the running and the passing game. So that was a really good value pick. And then another guy who fell because of injury was TJ Clemmings, who the Vikings got in the 4th round. And Clemmings, I had Clemmings as a top 10 player, and he was my number 2 tackle. And he's very athletic, and he's really physical, and I think that offensive line lacked physicality, especially at tackle. And maybe the foot injury is going to hold him back for a while, but I think that given fair opportunity and given good health, I think he's going to be able to compete for a starting job on that offensive line, be it on the outside or in the inside of it. So those are probably the best late picks that you haven't mentioned, or we haven't mentioned already. So, and another pick hold on. Yeah, okay, so we're good. Sorry about that. So, in terms of kind of moving forward, looking at fits that we particularly like, are there any like guys who like really fit into their team that stand out to you?
Um, I mean, let me think about this. I really liked I like the fit of Dupree going to Pittsburgh. I think yeah, it's really weird like watching Pittsburgh draft a few years because they've they look you go back to 2013 and they drafted like Jarvis Jones, who is not very athletic. And
They
in the
drafted.
past two and in the past 2 years they've grabbed guys like Ryan Shazier, who was a freak athlete from at middle linebacker. And then this year they grabbed Dupree, who had an unreal combine this year. And I think Dupree, while I while I question where he is like right now in terms of like recognizing what the offensive line is trying to do with him, setting up pass rush moves, just general like football awareness in terms of like being aggressive towards the offensive line. There's no questioning like his athleticism and what he brings for the future in Pittsburgh. And I think landing with that coaching staff, Mike Tomlin is head coach. He'll have Joey Porter as linebacking coach. That's a really, really good fit and really smart, talented coaches to learn from. I thought that was a really good fit.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And I think it's really funny that they drafted like the anti Jarvis Jones.
Yeah.
Um, uh, a pick I really like, and it's funny that I bring this up because I didn't actually really like the player that much. Was the Daniel Hunter pick for Minnesota, and Hunter was getting this like ridiculous hype during the pre-draft or the pre-draft process because he was a super athletic, but you watch him and he was like very very raw, not polished pass rusher at all, and just he was a very frustrating prospect to watch. But then you pair him with Mike Zimmer, and Mike Zimmer is just this guru in terms of polishing these defensive linemen, and loves getting these freak athletes on his defensive line. And I think this is really the best case scenario for both parties. And I think that Hunter is going to be able to really thrive there. And another pick I really liked was the Ronald Darby pick, which I kind of talked about earlier. And I think that he's just a really athletic corner. And I think playing in that number 2 spot across from Stephon Gilmore and just kind of being able to press and run, it really maximizes his talent, and you're not really asking him to do too much. And I think that's just going to be a really good fit for him. Hopefully, he gets used correctly. I have no idea what to think of Rex Ryan anymore, but I'm kind of banking on his defensive prowess to maximize him. So I think if my projection is correct, I think he's going to be a pretty good player in Buffalo. So similar in similar vein, do you see any like later round guys? Day 3 or even late day 2. Try to stick with day 3. Guys who could make an impact from the get go.
One spot that I really liked, or one pick that I really liked, I liked Darren Waller going to the Ravens. Um, 6'6", 240, ran a 4.45 at the combine. And this is a guy that he could end up playing tight end for them they drafted Max Williams, but it's always good to have 2 talented tight ends. This is like a freak of a wide receiver. He's still a little raw, coming from that Georgia Tech triple option offense isn't going to do too much for your future NFL development. But you pair that size and speed with Joe Flacco's arm and having Brashad Perriman on the other side. This is a guy could be a source for big plays in the very near future. That I thought that was really, really good fit for the Ravens and for Waller. And I touched on this a bit earlier, but the Cardinals grabbing Shaq Riddick in the, I want to say it was in the 5th round. He was horribly misused at West Virginia. He's like 6'6", 245, like a long, athletic, lean body, but he was playing a lot of like 5 technique and 4-eye technique, which isn't ideal for his body type, but that was the defense that West Virginia ran. So now you get him back out in space where he's going to be an edge rusher. I really, really like that film. I wouldn't be surprised if he's more productive than Marcus Golden in the upcoming year.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all, just because of how athletic Shaq Riddick is and how bad Marcus Golden is. Um, Player, I mean, I love the Darrell Williams pick by the Panthers. I think that, first of all, their current tackle situation is so bad, and they needed an upgrade. And they kind of waited to take a tackle, which I thought was interesting. But they got Darrell Williams at the top of the 4th round, and Williams really provides a long physical tackle, who's really going to beat up the guy across from him. And I think I think he warranted a much higher selection. And he actually reminds me a lot of Cyrus Kwanjo, and what a lot of people kind of wanted Cyrus Kwanjo to be before the whole knee thing kind of screwed with that. And he's obviously not the perfect player, where he still has issues with speed, moving laterally with like really really good speed rushers. I mean, obviously people bring up his Vic Beasley game, but I think overall, I think his length and his physicality is going to make him a really successful NFL player. And I think he's going to get a chance to get that starting job from day one. And I think he's going to be able to make a positive impact. Sticking with the Panthers, I also really like the Cameron Artis-Payne pick. I mean, they have a lot of big athletic targets in their passing game, where they have Funchess and they have Kelvin Benjamin, they have Greg Olson. But the cool thing about Cameron Artis-Payne is he provides a nice presence in the passing game from the running back position, both as a receiver and a pass blocker. And as a running back, he's very elusive. I mean, he's just kind of a very solid player. People bring up his age; he's 25 years old, but you're still kind of getting those like peak running back years anyway. So I think that was a kind of a solid value in the late round. Josh Shaw for the Bengals. I mean, he had the whole weird thing jumping off a balcony into a pool or whatever. I don't know what happened. But the point, I mean, he's a very physical cornerback, and I mean, very, very physical cornerback, and he can hit. He can also play safety. So they're providing competition in their defensive backfield, and also, really nice, brand of physicality. And there's a couple more, but I think I'm just going to finish off with this one, is the Quan Alexander pick by the Buccaneers. Yeah. I mean, Tampa Bay and Lovie Smith, they love athletic linebackers, and Quan Alexander is a guy who really moves like a safety in space, and is also, a good tackler. I mean, he's not the greatest in traffic, but he attacks the line of scrimmage pretty willingly and aggressively. So I think that he has a chance to, I mean, if there's a defense where he can play and have his talent maximized, it's in that Tampa defense. So I really like those picks. And going off of that, with rookie opportunities and everything, evaluating talent, evaluating fit and opportunity and everything like that, we get to the big questions of predicting offensive and defensive rookie of the year. So I'll let you start with your defensive rookie of the year pick.
Well, I've been going back and forth with this. I've pretty much got 2 guys locked down in my mind. It's either got to be Vic Beasley, edge for Atlanta, or his Clemson teammate Stephon Anthony, who's going to the Saints. I think they're both in really good situations to succeed. Anthony, he's gonna be the starting middle linebacker on that Rob Ryan defense. So pretty much by default, he's gonna rack up a very good amount of tackles. He's a big hitter, so he'll have his highlight plays. I think that was one of my favorite picks in the first round, and that's a really good fit for him to excel. in the future. And for Vic Beasley, he's going to come in and be a guy. He's automatically going to be the best pass rusher on the Falcons. So this is a guy who's going to have his fair share of opportunities, and he has the talent to make the most and maximize those opportunities. I wouldn't be surprised to see Vic Beasley near double-digit sacks this season, but I think I think Stephon Anthony has the inside edge right now just because his numbers are going to be probably better than any other rookie middle linebacker this year.
Yeah, and that's a really good point with Anthony too, because he's also in that heavy blitz scheme that Rob Ryan likes to use. So he's going to get a lot of opportunities to put up numbers, and just in terms of like how the voting goes for these awards, I think that like they look at like tackle numbers and love like inside linebackers and stuff like that. So yeah, that's totally plausible. I'm going to go with Vic Beasley here. I think that he's going to just completely blow the doors off wherever they put him on that defense, and he's just a dynamic pass rusher. He's going to put up, I'm just going to say like double-digit sacks, 12, 14 sacks a season, and come away with the award. And moving on to Offensive Rookie of the Year, I'll start, and I'm gonna go with like the homer pick, and I'm gonna say Nelson Aguilar. I think that he is in the perfect situation to succeed. He's gonna be starting on the outside. But they're also gonna be moving him around, putting him in the slot, and he's gonna get a lot of opportunities to make plays down the field, and also get plays underneath, get screen plays, and really just given opportunities to create yards after the catch as well as make plays down the field. And I think he has a nice shot at a 1,000-yard season and potentially 7 or 8 touchdowns. So if he is able to do that, which I think he'll be able to, I think he'll come away with the award. What about you?
I'm gonna go with the quarterback, Jameis Winston with the Bucs.
That's a hot take.
Off the field, you're not gonna love him off the field, but for me, I feel like if the rookie quarterback, if you're a top 5 pick rookie quarterback and you don't suck, you're probably gonna get the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. Just looking at in the past 10 years, we've got Ben Roethlisberger, Vince Young, Matt Ryan, Sam Bradford, Cam Newton, RG3. That's like half quarterbacks. I feel like, I think he's going to come in, have a solid rookie year. He's going to thrive having Vincent Jackson, Mike Evans, and Austin Seferian-Jenkins to throw to. If he doesn't suck, they'll probably give him the award. That's how I feel about it.
I think that RG3 and Cam Newton both had statistically fantastic rookie years, and even Bradford, given the situation that he came into, had a pretty solid rookie year. And I'm not even really questioning Jameis Winston's talents, and the prospect of him throwing to ASJ and throwing to Mike Evans and Vincent Jackson, that's all very enticing. But that offensive line is so bad.
Yeah.
And I think that that's going to hold him back from really producing. And I think that his style of passing is going to lead to a lot of turnovers in his first season. So we'll see with that. I get where you're coming from with that, and I think that there's a lot of potential, there. But that offensive line scares me. You could put some of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league behind that offensive line. They're going to have some serious issues, let alone a rookie. So finishing up, we're going to hit some of these questions, and we got a question about Brashad Perryman and what we think about the Brashad Perryman pick. So Charles, what do you think about that?
When I first watched, before I even really watched Brashad Perryman, all that was thrown in your face all over Twitter. Oh, he can't catch the ball. His drop rate's so bad. And, when you look at a guy we'll take 2 guys that had drop issues in this class. Sammy Coates and Brashad Perriman were the two big guys where we're talking like, oh man, like I don't know if we can rely on them to catch the ball. But you go back and you watch Perriman, for me, it was more concentration based and technique based. Like he's going out like trying to catch the ball with his hands, but I guess sometimes he's thinking about what he's going to do after the catch because he does have that like ridiculous rare speed that he can utilize after the catch. But with Coates, for me, is more like he's trying to catch it with his body, and that's just like sloppy, poor technique. But I really like I like the Perriman fit. I like the potential for explosive plays with Joe Flacco and Brashad Perriman. That's going to be really enticing for the Ravens. And I think right now he's probably where Torrey Smith is already, with the potential to be a better route runner and more just complete overall receiver.
Yeah, and I think the hands thing with Perryman was so overblown. One, because I do think it was a concentration issue, which can be fixed. And two, he was also put in a lot of contested situations, jump balls and such, and sometimes he came away with them, sometimes he didn't. And I really do like that fit in Baltimore because one, you have an offense that's going to be able to utilize his speed. You have a quarterback that's going to really be able to maximize where he's winning as a athletic downfield receiver. And two, just because of the weapons around him and the nature of like the situation he's coming to, I think he has a really good chance to kind of build his confidence as a receiver, which is so important. And you kind of look at what Kelvin Benjamin did last year in that Carolina offense, where they just kind of kept on going back to him, despite he might drop a pass or he might not come to the ball onto a pass. But with Perryman, it's going to be the same situation where he's going to get lots of opportunities to kind of make plays and build his confidence, which is so important for these rookie wide receivers. And I think that his growth over the course of the season is going to be exponential, where he might start off a little bit slow, but I think he's going to be able to gain momentum as the season goes on, as he becomes more and more confident in himself. I didn't love the pick, but I think the fit is really good. And Perryman is a rare athlete in terms of his movement skills and his size. And I think if he pans out, which I think there's a good chance of happening, I think he could end up being pretty damn good. Looking back, I really like that. I think the fit really qualifies, taking him as high as they did. And we don't actually have that many more questions. We have this one question about just kind of summarizing Oakland's draft, which we already kind of did, and talking about Amari Cooper. And everything I know about Amari Cooper and everything I know about Derek Carr, I'm pretty confident Amari Cooper is going to have a productive rookie season, because one, he's basically that's not true because they have Michael Crabtree now, but he is a dynamic. He's going to provide a lot for the team as a downfield threat. He's going to be able to work underneath because he's such a dynamic route runner. He's just going to be open consistently, and I think they're really going to try to feed him the ball because he's the playmaker, and you get the ball in the hands of the playmakers. And he's going to be able, but at the same time, he's going to be able to create those touches for himself by his ability to get open. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him have a season where he catches 70, 80 passes, and threatens 1,000 yards. I don't think that's unrealistic at all, especially in an offense that is just kind of him, Michael Crabtree, and then Clive Walford, and there isn't really a defined running game either. So they're probably going to end up passing the ball a lot, and having a downfield quarterback, downfield passer like Derek Carr, and like a guy who has a deep threat ability like Amari Cooper. You have those big plays, that big play potential as well. So I think that Amari Cooper is going to have a really productive rookie season, and I'm just going to take a guess, and I'm going to say him and Nelson Aguilar are the only receivers who are going to break 1,000 yards next year. Or
I agree with that.
Rookie wide receivers,
yeah, I like that. I don't know. For Kevin White, it's on Jay Cutler, and if he actually gives a fuck this year, and that's not something you can really bank on, even though Kevin White is extremely talented. I agree with you. I think Cooper and Aguilar have the best chance to go over 1,000, with I think Devontae Parker. I think he's going to get close, man. I really do.
I think the
Uh,
issue with Devontae Parker is like there's so many mouths to feed now in that offense
yeah,
because they traded for Stills, they have Landry who's good, they signed Jordan Cameron who's good, they drafted Jay Ajayi who does plenty of work in the passing game, and they already have Lamar Miller, and they have Greg Jennings too. I mean, obviously you take a guy top 15, you're going to try to get the ball to him. But I just think that there's so many mouths to feed in that offense. It's just going to be hard. But I could definitely see him having like a 750-yard season and getting a bunch of touchdowns because that's kind of the player he is. But yeah, I mean, this rookie wide receiver class will be interesting to see play out because I also think Tyler Lockett has a good chance of being productive as well because I mean, there's really no other receiving. I mean, Doug Baldwin's kind of and Jermaine Kearse sucks, and they just traded for Jimmy Graham, who's obviously Jimmy Graham, but I think Tyler Lockett's going to provide a lot as a downfield threat for the Seahawks. So he's probably going to have a productive season as well, but we'll see. So we have no more questions, and that wraps up the wrap up. Now we'll expand on this on our next show, but we're going to be doing a series over the summer, basically highlighting conference to conference NFL prospects for next season. So we are getting into summer scouting. So everyone should get very, very excited about that because I know I am because I've been watching ACC prospects the entire day. So until next time, this is Draft Thoughts.